All right, you ready? Okay, great. Let's get then. All right. Quote, when consumers purchase a Toyota, they're not simply purchasing a car, truck, or van. They're placing their trust in our company, Akio Toyota. It is because I agree with the thinking of the CEO of Toyota that the consumer ultimately deters the direction of any company that I stand resolved that net neutrality should be repealed. Now, before we get into today's debate, I'm sure you would like some definitions, and we would all like some definitions. So I'm first going to start off with defining net neutrality. Net neutrality is defined as the notion that internet service providers, or also known as ISPs, shouldn't be able to, quote, slow down, speed up, or block data as it is routed from its content or originators to end users. And repealed means to revoke or abrogate by legislative enactment, and should is obviously preferable. And as I'm arguing that we should repeal net neutrality, and you're arguing otherwise. Now, as we get in our debate, let's go ahead and start off with a few points. So first, I want to start off with the point of crony capitalism. Now, here's why I'm debating this point. So the whole goal of net neutrality was to provide equal internet for all and to prevent ISPs from throttling certain sites. However, this was never really a problem, and it still would not be a problem. And it actually encourages crony capitalism, and it actually is crony capitalism. And here's why. First off, net neutrality was enacted in 2015 by under the Obama administration by the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and they did this to stop from sites throttling. However, it's a totally one-sided way. It promotes corporations such as Google, Netflix, and Twitter, and Facebook. All these corporations are totally for it. But why are they totally for it? They're totally for it because they have the opportunity that they can have complete control over corporations, and I'm going to explain why here in a second. So here's how it works. First off, ISPs cannot charge differently. They can't, throw slides. They have to treat all users the same and have to provide the same access for all users. However, Netflix, YouTube, and Facebook are not affected by this at all, and that's why they're for it, because it supports their side and it gets rid of their opponents such as Verizon, AT&T, and all those other ISPs. It promotes these other corporations, and it's a totally one-sided way. It's the government picking the winners and losers in the situation. And another example of crony capitalism is the paid.
Okay, so I'm going to argue that it's a net negative for three reasons. First, I'm going to go to the definitions. There is one thing I'd actually like to add to net neutrality. That's that it affects privacy as well. So it's not just a slow lane and a fast lane and throttling. It also affects the privacy, which will also be one of my lead arguments. And going to your analogy about the car, the thing is, what the service providers are providing is data, and this goes back to 1996. They wanted to charge more data to schools to profit off that. AOL did. I don't know if you remember that internet. It was the first time I had internet, and I was a teenager. But it was kind of funny because you had to buy it from AOL or CompuServe or one of these funny companies, and it wasn't like the internet we have today at all. It was they curated all the content, and so they came up with this idea in 1996 that you can't do that. So it's not like, so the analogy would be that no matter how many appliances I have that run water or electric, I pay the same electric bill because I pay for the service that I'm using. So there's three reasons that I believe there's a negative to this. One is that it's monopoly. Two is the privacy. And three, the third reason is that it allows providers to censor, so that's the throttling, which is the big thing that I think you mentioned. You didn't talk about the monopoly; you just talked about the throttling. So I'm going to talk about. Let me talk about the privacy have a minute. So the thing with the privacy is that it's on two fronts. There's also some Trump legislation that the thing is that the service provider can't act like Twitter or Facebook and collect information on you and sell that, but now they can do that. And the second thing is that in this day and age, people are turning to VPNs or proxies, our Tor to keep private, our encryption, and those things already slow you down to begin with. And there's ways of knowing that someone's doing that. So it's possible that it would be much harder to keep your information private. Okay, and then, and then you talk about Netflix and you say, well, you're giving control to these corporations. Of course, this is written by a former Verizon lawyer. Pi is a former Verizon lawyer, so he's as corporate as it gets. The thing is, Netflix is going to profit off this because now I have to pay extra for Netflix. So instead of all the water coming into my house, now I have to pay extra for the dryer or for the washer. Or now I have to pay extra for electricity because I have a computer. So it's itemizing. It's a loss for the consumer.
All right, I actually totally forgot I had 3 minutes, so I didn't have to get to my other 2 points I actually wanted to make here. So I'm going to go ahead and get to those. I'm going to actually respond to your points. Now, my other point I was going to make was competition ensures no discrimination. Now, I know what you were talking about with the monopoly and the privacy and the throttling. Now, here's why they won't do the throttling. First off, is because if we took away net neutrality, they wouldn't do throttling because now so many consumers have so much control over the product. And that was my main point in my opening quote I provided. It's if the consumer does not trust the company and is not satisfied with the company, they'll ultimately just dump that company and go to the next one that does provide them with service that they do like. And they get corporations would get so much backlash from people who are getting like, oh, you have to pay $15 if you want to go to certain sites. And also a big analogy about how, oh, you need to pay $20 for Netflix, you need to pay $20 if you want to go to Facebook, and they'll upcharge you more, is more of an assumption more than anything, because there's actually no solid proof that they'll do that. It's a slippery slope fallacy that, oh, it'll just all going downhill once we take away net neutrality, even though we've had we did not have net neutrality from 1990s to 2015. So we never had it, and it was never really a problem. The only circumstance where it was a problem was with Comcast. Comcast throttled Netflix. And what happened with Comcast is now they're one of the most distrusted ISPs of all time. It hurt their company when they did try this little slight cash grab. And so now the whole thing about privacy. Now, I don't completely understand because, I mean, the government still has access to your privacy even under these rules, and ISPs still have access to your privacy, and so do Google, Facebook, and Twitter, who are unaffected by this. So I don't really see how it's too much of a valid point in today's case. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and go on to monopoly. Now, I'm going to address this quick because I'm running out of time. Now, the whole thing about a monopoly is actually net neutrality created the monopoly because now ISPs have to charge the same for every. So there can be no new corporations that come out and say, hey, we can up your speed, or we can give you better speed if you pay for this certain price or something like that. Now everyone is stuck at the same playing field, and now Verizon, AT&T, and other sources have to keep this state regulation. And the whole point about the crony capitalism point I was creating was that ISPs have to pay the same amount of money for all bandwidth. Like they have to pay for bandwidth traffic. For example, Netflix, they'll get a lot of traffic and they have to pay a lot of money for Netflix's trafficking. So it's a huge burden on ISPs, and it's a huge crony capitalism idea because now ISPs are ultimately in trouble because they're getting this unfair thing, and it totally destroys USA's whole free market economy thing.
Okay. So I'm just gonna go through your points and continue building my case. The thing is that the regulations we have now, by saying that it's all electricity and it's all water, they already control the market. They already make it a fair playing field because it's all the same thing. So like you can't stop someone from slowing something down. There's no need to complain about someone speeding it up to make it like that would make it better. And I think that goes back to the idea that the thing is, internet's cheap anyway. Okay, anyone can afford internet. For $15, you can buy the internet. Okay, that's a an hour of work for the average person. So 1 hour of working by the internet. Most people have. I have two internets because I have Spectrum and I have Verizon. So I have two internet plans, and they already charge me. Spectrum already charges me for how much broadband I use, and Verizon already charges me for how much data I use. So they already charge me for how much I use. So, they don't charge me for what appliance I have, because that would obviously be silly. And then, so you talk about the 1934 Act, but the thing is that these service providers, this is a monopoly, because it says they own the line, so now they can control everything that goes over the line. It's just kind of like saying I can't call somebody now. They can control who I call, so they control the line. But the problem with that, with them controlling the line, is is that the problem with them controlling the line is well, yeah, so they would control the line. Oh, okay. So, okay, the thing is that they've built more lines since 2015 and since 1999. So they've actually increased their number of lines. I'll go ahead and show you this data here, and I'll go ahead and share it with you. They've actually increased the number of lines by 50%, the largest jump since 1999. It was actually the first time I could get internet in the middle of nowhere. So if their innovations is being held back because they own the line, that's a bunch of nonsense. They just built more lines since the thing, and their profits have also increased since the thing. And the numbers that they're using come from lobbyists. The pie guy used to work for Verizon, so he's telling you what the lobbyists for these companies are telling you, and it's that they want to cash in. And so that's the thing, is that with the monopoly point, and I guess I ran out of time.
Okay, I'm still a little confused on your monopoly point, but I think I'm starting to catch a little bit more of the drift. So you said they already have a control over the market, that they've already built a whole bunch of lines, so they already have this huge control of the market. However, that's just them being innovative, and I'm with them doing that. Now, a huge point we can say is service providers control everything. They can control what I can see. They can censor what I want to see. However, if they do that to me, I'll ultimately just dump that ISP and I'll go to the next one that doesn't do that. And I think that's basic consumer and economics, that supply and demand kind of thing. I want that, I will get that kind of scenario. I want to put my trust in this other company because I want that product. And if they upcharge me more, they'll regret it. For example, EA Sports came out with Battlefront 2, and they try to do this little sly tactic and have a monopoly over the game, where if you wanted to get this better character in the game, you had to pay extra money for it. And what happened is they lost $3.1 billion because the consumer was so upset with this and what they were trying to take advantage of them. And EA lost all that money was because of how the consumer was not happy with the service. Same thing with ISPs. If we are not happy with what they're doing, we'll go to the next one, or they'll lose profit because we are all leaving them. It's basic economics, and I think you can probably agree with me on that. So that is why net neutrality is ultimately also deteriorating the free market, which was ultimately my 3 point. It's getting into the free market, and it's actually creating monopolies, because what it's doing is that we have the ISPs like Verizon. They're already really big, right? So it's because they're already really big, that's the big and it's through net neutrality that they can hold that position, and that other smaller companies can't do anything about it because they have to abide by net neutrality rules that are keeping them back in the Title II 1934 Communications Act. And so really this net neutrality is actually hurting the economy, and it's picking winners and choosers in this system, because it's saying that, oh, these ISPs have to pay more if they have to pay more for certain bandwidths, and they're already in big control. Now, here's what I'm basically trying to say here. I'm going to try to wrap up some of my ideas. What I'm saying here is that corporations such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter are not in opposition of net neutrality, because it doesn't hurt them and it hurts their opponents, such as ISPs, Verizon, AT&T. It hurts their opponents and not them. It's the government, again, getting into the free market system and not allowing an open free market. It is hurting the economy because now ISPs have to pay for the bandwidth of huge traffic sites such as Netflix, YouTube, and other sites. And really, it's a big issue that's why we ultimately need to remove net neutrality.
I would say that the free market is saying that I can do whatever I want with electricity or water that comes in my house, and that's pretty much the same for the data that comes in the house. And I think there's a huge difference between what you're saying and what's really going on here, because you keep talking about Google and Netflix and EA Sports. They're not internet service providers. You're not talking about internet service providers. You're talking about private companies and if they would profit or if they wouldn't. So you're not addressing internet service providers selling information. You're not addressing the fact that I have to buy my internet from Spectrum, and now and I believe the 1934 Act and that Spectrum is trying to capitalize on says that the same thing as that phone line, that they own the phone line, so I can only buy my phone service from AT&T because AT&T owns the phone line. But now I can only buy now I'm stuck buying my internet service from Spectrum, and they can curate. This says that's the language that's in the thing. They can curate it. They can curate it, so they control what streaming video service I have, and it's a new problem. Going back to 1996 when this first came up, it's a lot. The internet's a lot different. We're talking about AOL and these services. I don't even know if AOL exists anymore. I know Comcast doesn't. I know that Prodigy doesn't. These services don't even exist anymore, and they're trying to sell you into, you had to buy one of these services, and you couldn't even talk to somebody if they had the other service. It was that silly, and of course it flopped because no one wanted that. And this is dial-up internet, so there's no video, there's no music. It's not the same. It's not the same thing at all. It's very primitive. I mean, at that time I couldn't even imagine. I remember reading about this in 1996. I couldn't even imagine that it would go this far. I mean, I thought I'd probably be much older than I am now by then, right? And the other thing, you're not addressing, like I said, look, they built twice as many lines since 2015, and they have plenty of I'll show you the numbers. Their own numbers are my evidence that they've made plenty of money since 2015. There's been plenty of innovation. It's cheap to begin with. Anyone can afford this service. There is not a problem with this service not being affordable. Most people have two plans. It would take the average person 2 hours of work to pay for two plans. So there is no problem with service to begin with. I mean, what don't you like about the internet? I mean, tell me what service is being hindered? What don't you like about the internet? I haven't heard that at all. I've just heard that if you can charge more for each service, like somehow it's going to be better. Just like I mean, I remember I didn't even really know if I wanted a smartphone because the internet service that they had back in 2004, it was so bad on the phone, it was ridiculously bad. So we definitely needed some sort of legislation to make it better.
Okay, so I think there's a little bit of confusion on why I'm using these corporations for examples, and I think you're kind of missing my point I'm making. Okay, let me try to make this clear. The whole point of I'm mentioning these other corporations such as Google because they're not affected by net neutrality. We're talking about ISPs, right? Net neutrality affects ISPs. That is what I'm saying. And corporations such as Google, YouTube, and Facebook have already tried censoring and throttling their user content. So it's not the ISPs we're worried about. It's these corporations that are doing it. So net neutrality isn't even doing the thing it's supposed to be doing. It's not doing its job ultimately. It's failing at its job of trying to keep from throttling or censoring certain things. That is the big issue here. The big issue is that these other corporations are getting a total bypass, and that's why they're for net neutrality. And service providers, internet service providers, have to pay for the bandwidth that goes to them because YouTube and Netflix get huge traffic, and that costs money. It costs bandwidth to keep those speeds at steady rates. In order to keep those speeds at steady rate, they have to pay more money. ISPs have to pay more money. They can't adjust and say, "Hey, you have to pay us because we're charging you so much money." Now, just because someone is making money from something doesn't mean that it's totally justified, for example. We can't just say, oh, well, they're making innovation, they're making profit, therefore there's no problem here. Yeah, but they're also losing profit because of the unfair advantage that these other corporations have in this circumstance. It's a crony capitalist society where the ISPs have to pay for the bandwidth and have to charge more just so they can keep net neutrality laws, so to keep it all even for everybody. Now I'm going to go through a lot of your points. You mentioned a lot of points here, and you said that certain sites have died over the time, and like certain ISPs, and you said Comcast you knew for sure would die. I don't know. Comcast is still around. Maybe you just missaid that. But basically, Comcast lost a lot of money and are so distrusted because they tried throttling sites. They tried doing tactics such as charging you extra for something, or they were trying to slow down a certain site. They got so much backlash and they lost so much money from that. So ultimately, net neutrality should be repealed because it's not solving the problem. And a lot of people are worried that ISPs are going to upcharge you more for money. ISPs are going to throttle what you can see. They're going to censor what you can see. This wouldn't be the case because if the customer is not satisfied with their product, they won't buy it. It's not there's already a monopoly. They can go to the next service provider and actually inspire more competition. Certain consumers will just go to the next ISP that does not censor their content or filter out what they can see. And also net neutrality laws, such as us being worried about other things, definitely is not something to worry about. I'll bring up more in my next speech.
People are going to switch their service if the problem is volume. So if it's the same problem universally, they're still gonna just switch their service. No, they're just gonna choose which one they want. They're just gonna choose which service they want. They want to watch YouTube or Vimeo or whatever. Now you have to choose. You can't watch both. Now you have to choose one. So you have less that way, because you have to choose what service instead of being able to just choose the service and pay a flat fee. And as I keep saying, and I did make a mistake. I said CompuServe. There was a company. It was based out of here in Columbus, Ohio. It got bought up by AOL. It was called CompuServe. It was actually my first internet service provider, and yeah, they got bought up by AOL a long time ago. So I did misspeak when I said that. But what I'm talking about when I say it's monopoly is I'm talking about the line. I'm saying that they own the line. So now they're saying this. What this is saying is that since they own the line, they have the right to curate the content the same way that it benefited a phone provider in 1934, that they can curate the content since they own the line. So now they choose they can choose what you buy, and that's what the problem is. Instead of paying a flat fee, which is already low, it's $15, anyone can afford it, pretty much. Now you have to pay for each service. So it actually, I mean, it is very hypothetical on both sides. I know that you said it's kind of like we're going to fall off the slope, but there's real reasons to be concerned here, because they're saying they own the line, so they want to curate the content. And the thing is that it didn't really become a problem until 2012 for a lot of reasons, because the technology has changed so rapidly, would be the largest reason. But it was actually the first time that we saw companies like Verizon slow down people for tethering. We saw, I think it was the company you were talking about, Compu, whatever. They were slowing people down who use BitTorrent, I believe, or it was. So we didn't really have this problem. It was the government saying you can't do that. Like you might not like it, but it's all over the same pipeline. So that's what you sell. You just sell the data that comes into the house. And that is the advantage. I think that is the free market, that you're selling me the data that comes in the house, and I choose the rest. The company does not have the right to do that. They do not have a right to itemize it and charge. I mean, what's the benefit of itemizing here? I mean, what service are we talking about that would be better? So it's just as hypothetical on both sides. And the thing is that I can show you their own number. I'm going to go ahead and show you their own numbers that they're making plenty of.
Okay. So first, I want to respond to what you said. You said you can now in the future, and you kind of agreed it was very hypothetical, and it's actually very hypothetical, and it's actually a slippery slope fallacy to say, oh, now they're going to choose what sites you can go to. There's no guarantee of this, and there's no idea we can know for certain they would actually do this, and they wouldn't do this, because the whole point I've been driving this whole time is that they wouldn't do this. because it would hurt them ultimately, and people would ditch them and dump their internet service providing and go to the next person who provides them with internet service where they can have more viewing to other things, if that makes sense to you. So basically, they're saying that they're going to be able to choose what you buy and they can show what you want. They're going to censor what you can see. Yeah, sure, they can do that. However, the competition and the competition will ultimately drive out discrimination. They wouldn't do this because their other competition would reject and be like, hey, we're not doing what they're doing. We're not making you have to block it. We're not throttling your sites. We're not doing all that. We're providing you with what we've always promised you, which is having same bandwidth for certain sites and all this. So it actually is removing that neutrality actually opens up the free market, because now instead of it always just being, oh, everybody's on this playing field, basically, here's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get my thoughts back together. The main point I'm driving here is that net neutrality is it's a crony capitalism thing, and it isn't actually free market, and that's why we need to get rid of it. It's not maybe personally hurting me, but it's hurting the business and economic world which I live in. So I might not directly be affected by it, but in the future, or if I'm part of a certain job or other people's businesses or something like that, can be harmed from this. Because now corporations such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter, they can have as much bandwidth uses as they want. They can use so much bandwidth, and ISPs have to pay for it. They can't charge these sites for how much bandwidth they're using. And just because, and you brought up how you can bring up the numbers about how much they're making a whole bunch of money. It's all right. Yeah, sure, they're making money, but that doesn't still mean it's not crony capitalism and it's not fair. Because in a free market world, everything needs to be fair. We need to have a fair playing field. It's not a value of the government should take favors and pick its winners and choosers, because that's exactly what China's doing. And China's economy isn't the best. And so the reason why I brought up EA was because EA was just an example. EA did something that the consumer hated, and the consumer has so much power over the product that if the consumer does not like the product will ultimately fail. And that's the same circumstance in this equation. So I'll pass the mic back to you.
Okay, what I was talking about being hypothetical, I gave examples and you didn't. So I had perfect examples that they charge extra they would slow down people for throttling, and they slow down people for using BitTorrent. Two things that they obviously didn't like, because throttling is a service that they want you to pay extra for that anyone can do. It's the same data that you're already paying for. So if it's the free market, who really cares if I'm throttling? And if it's a free market, who really cares if I'm using BitTorrent, because it's data that I paid for? I'm trading you the CD that I already paid for, just the same way that they said that it was a free market for me to copy the CD onto a tape. So and you're not telling me how it will be better. I haven't heard how it will be better. And you keep talking about services and not service providers. You still haven't tied to who I would go to, because because what I'm saying is monopoly, and it all comes over the same line. So I can't really go to someone else. Or in best case scenario, there's more than one phone provider I can go to, and each phone. Verizon actually has TV that they're going to launch as part of this. They have their own TV service they're getting ready to launch. So I mean, there you go. So now Verizon, I'm not going to have Verizon much longer, but I'm on Verizon. So they won't. Now I have to pay Verizon extra for TV service, just like when I got a cell phone 10 or however many years ago, and I said, take this darn internet thing off. I don't want it. What is this supposed to be? You want me to pay for this? Yeah, right. But now I won't have a choice. Like, that's all I'll have. Like, how is that better? So you're not distincting between companies and ISPs. I'm talking about the line. I'm saying that it has not hurt them. It has not hurt innovation, because their profits are increasing. They're building plenty of line. They built 50% line. They built more lines than they did since 1999. So all these things are happening. There's nothing holding them back. And it's all how the thing is, you have a saying that it's all the same data are what keep it equal. That's the equalizer, is that everyone's selling the same thing. If I don't like it, I'll go somewhere else. So there already is, it's just an equalizer that says the data is the pipeline. If you don't like it, you go somewhere else, as opposed to now I have to choose all these different services, just like I'm buying cable TV now. So now I have to choose what services I want instead of paying a flat fee. So I don't see how that couldn't end up being more, especially if you're paying a flat fee as opposed to now you have to pay for a video service. Now you have to pay for whatever service now. And if if you they don't like something you're doing, they just slow you down. So if you're concerned about internet privacy, because I haven't heard any contention of this, now it's going to be harder to slow you down, because you're on a proxy or you're using Tor, and they might not like that you're doing that. So now you can't do it.
Okay. So I think there's been a little bit of confusion on both our parts, maybe. But the whole thing about, you brought up your hypothetical situation. You brought up the BitTorrent, how they're throttling of the BitTorrent. That was actually Comcast who did this throttling. And here's what happened during this time. Comcast, once consumers found out that Comcast did this, they tried throttling BitTorrent. They got really exposed, and they actually got hurt from it. My whole point is, if ISPs did try doing this, they would lose profit from this. They would lose profit from trying to go to trying to charge for other internet service, or trying to throttle certain internet providers, because people would not be happy with it. People would not want that product, so they'd go to the next one. And I think you're actually kind of agreeing with me here, because you said the best case scenario, I can just go to another internet service provider. That is what if we take away net neutrality, if you don't like one internet service provider, you can go to the next one. That is basically what I'm saying. And you brought up the whole monopoly thing, how there's going to be this huge monopoly on everything, and how they already are in control. And I'm kind of a little confused on what you're really trying to drive at this point, because they really don't have a monopoly. I mean, like, under net neutrality, Verizon already has a monopoly, and this is why I'm saying it's hurting. This is the net negative of this is the main negative of net neutrality, because of the monopoly. It's because of internet providers such as Verizon and AT&T. They're already at the top. They already have to provide same internet capabilities for everybody. Smaller businesses have to do the same thing, except no one can notice them, and they're completely left in the dirt because of net neutrality laws. It's a little complicated, but net neutrality laws put it where smaller companies really are kind of left in the dirt, and other companies such as that can't, because of net neutrality laws, that they can't provide new services. Like, oh, this smaller company's like, hey, we'll provide you with faster, better service for you. However, under net neutrality laws, they have to do all of them exactly the same, and people can't choose what they want. People have to just go with, oh, this is already the carrier I'm going with. Now, the whole privacy thing, now, it really depends on personal preference. It depends on what I want private. Now, I really don't see how net neutrality really affects us both ways, because really, you're giving away your access when you open a site. Facebook says, hey, can we have access to all this, blah, 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 blah. Net neutrality really isn't fixing this issue of privacy at all, and I really don't see how it's very relevant, because it's not really net neutrality doesn't really fix the issue of privacy if you want more privacy, because it really doesn't in the long run. So at the end of the day, net neutrality is actually preventing the free market, and is actually just leaving monopolies around. So and all the examples I've shown, I hope it.
The ISP cannot sell your information the way that Facebook does. They cannot collect your information and sell it. Now they can. So the difference between the ISP and Facebook, again, is that Facebook is a corporation, is a service. Facebook is a service, and the ISP is a provider. So I choose what service. Now, so if I don't want Facebook to sell my information, I just don't go on Facebook, right? So and Verizon actually just got in trouble for this a year ago. They were installing third-party cookies into their service, and they got busted for it, and they're in trouble with the FCC. So of course they want to get rid of this. So it's a very real problem. And I mean, the thing is, it doesn't matter if the company doesn't like that it wants to throttle me for tethering or whatever, for using my phone to power my laptop. I'm paying for that data. So that's the free market. I'm paying for the data. So if they don't like it, so what? Like they're trying to charge me for the same data, for the same to buy. They're trying to charge me to buy more data from them. They're trying to itemize them. They're trying to upcharge. So the thing is that this is all a big upcharge. So I mean, you say it's going to be creating innovation because there's new services. there are services that you already have, or there's new services that are created because of this. They're like this video, this Verizon TV that's just it's going to come out all of a sudden. What a surprise! It's a service that I don't need, but now I have to pay for it. And I mean, I think that's what they're worried about, is that there isn't anything that I can't get for the $15 I pay for my internet. There is no TV show, there's no movie that I can't watch. There's no sports that they can't charge me extra for. They can't do it. So I think that's really what they're worried about here. Like they finally found a way to stop that. But the thing is that as it stands now, and in the free market, freedom, all this stuff, it's all just data, it's all just information, and it's free to come into my house. Now it isn't free to come into my house because someone doesn't like it. Someone gets to censor that. And I mean, it could even be bad. I mean, maybe we couldn't do this debate because maybe the company doesn't like us. I mean, what's to say the company won't like us to do the debate? I mean, of course, I'm resting that this on the fact that they throttled, not only that they throttled BitTorrent. And so there's nothing to say that they won't do this. And I mean, the language talks about a slow lane and a fast lane. It's a very long to read, but so they're suggesting themselves, if you read this, that you will have to choose, that they can pick and choose. This company now, they get to pick and choose, the service provider, not Google or whoever, that they can choose what video I can watch. They get to decide all this, and they get to charge me extra for it. And I mean, that's just ridiculous. It should be a flat fee for data. That's what the internet is. It's not cable television.
All right. So let's say, for example, I own a room. So, and you can pay $5 to come into my room, and I say, hey, you can't talk about this when you come into my room. So you come into my room, and then you start saying something or whatever, and then I say, oh, you can't do that. Or the government says, for example, hey, you have to make sure that with your product, you have to do this with your product. Is that really exactly fair per se? Of course, it's not fair, because the government's getting our friend, and I own this room. I should be able to do what I want with my room. And I think this is the same thing with ISPs. They should be able to do what they want with their company, except if the consumer does not like their product, then ultimately the product will just fail. So the company has to do what the consumer likes, and that is ultimately what I'm debating here in this round. That net neutrality is prohibiting the fundamental nature of companies. It's preventing the fundamental nature of the free market economy we have. So you said ISPs cannot sell, right now they can't sell your information, but when you, like, for example, I was a little confused on this, but I think I'm kind of getting it. How ISPs, when you go to Facebook, how you're choosing to give it, but when you do it with an ISP, they can just take it. Of course, you said it yourself. Verizon got in a whole bunch of trouble when they did do things like this. And when companies like ISPs, internet service providers, try to throttle sites, they get in a whole bunch of trouble, and they get so much backlash from it. That is why I'm saying net neutrality, it really isn't really solving any problems. And there would be no problem if we took away net neutrality. It would go back to where we were, and it would actually allow more free market and allow more control of ISPs having over their product. So at the end of the day, basically what I'm going for here is that net neutrality is not providing us with a sufficient thing, and it is not fixing the problem. ISPs are really left unfair, and it's just a crony capitalism society at the end of the day.
My opponent doesn't seem to realize that net neutrality is designed by lobbyists to create a problem of splitting us by itemizing a service, split it up, so now you have to pay more for the same service. And now the service provider gets to choose who that from, because who provides that, because now they're not just providing data, they're providing services. So now we're going to have Verizon TV that I have to pay extra for. Now I have all these upsell services, and I'm supposed to believe that somehow it's going to be better, and somehow that's freedom, that I get to pay extra for their service now, as opposed to them just providing data that I get to, and I choose the data. And he doesn't seem to understand that they're saying that because of this 1934 Act, I believe that we own the line the same way that the phone company does. So the same way the phone company can control who I can call, they can control what service I get. So he doesn't seem to understand. He doesn't seem to understand that that's what the monopoly idea is rested on. Is that right now they're only allowed to provide data, but this splits it into providing services. And of course, the negative is, and to explain the privacy thing a little bit more, that it's already slows So now they can't throttle me for doing that. Now they can throttle me for doing that. So now it's going to be hard to do that. So I didn't hear any answer to that. I didn't hear an answer to, he doesn't seem to understand that Verizon got into doing that already. He doesn't differentiate between the service and the service provider, and that Verizon already got in trouble for selling my information. So the privacy thing is totally unanswered. The monopoly thing is just confused all around. And there's no benefit. I mean, he talks about tells me what the benefit is. I told him that they already did that. I talked about throttling. I talked about BitTorrent. So I gave examples